The last time my father called me his daughter, I was 17 years old, standing in the kitchen of our family restaurant with a college acceptance letter trembling in my hands. The next morning, he told me if I walked out that door, I was no longer family. By the end of that week, he had told people I was dead. Not missing. Not estranged. Dead. And 18 years later, when his heart started failing and the restaurant started collapsing with him, my parents finally reached out. Not because they missed me. Not because they were sorry. But because I had become the one thing they never thought I could become without them. Powerful. And by the time they called me back, what they had done to me was no longer the worst thing they had ever done. I grew up inside heat. That's the first thing I remember when I think about Garcias. Not love. Not laughter. Not family. Heat. The kind that wrapped itself around your face the second you pushed through the kitchen doors. The kind that made your shirt stick to your back before noon. The kind that turned dinner service into survival. My grandfather started that restaurant with 2 borrowed stoves and a handwritten menu taped to a window. My father inherited it like it was a crown and a prison at the same time. By the time I was old enough to reach the prep counter without standing on a milk crate, I was already expected to help. Dice onions. Roll silverware. Refill salsa. Wipe menus. Smile at customers. Never complain. In our house, the restaurant wasn't a business. It was religion. You didn't ask whether you wanted that life. You were born into it, and then one day you became old enough to carry it. My father used to say that every family needed one person who stayed when everyone else wanted to run. He'd say it while counting the register, or locking the back door, or rubbing the ache out of his wrists after a 14-hour day. I didn't understand it when I was little. When I got older, I did. He wasn't making an observation. He was assigning a role. My mother was softer than him on the outside, but not where it mattered. She knew how to smooth a moment after he said something cruel. She knew how to repackage control so it sounded like concern. Your father just worries. Your father sacrificed everything for this family. You know how much this place means to him. The thing about growing up in a family like that is you learn very early which thoughts are safe to say out loud and which ones you keep sealed inside your own chest. So I became the quiet kind of ambitious. I got good grades without making a big deal about it. I studied after closing with the smell of grease still in my hair. I borrowed old science textbooks from school because buying new ones felt too suspicious, too much like I was investing in a future my family had not approved. I told everyone at school I wanted to be a nurse. At home, I said I was just keeping my options open. I applied to colleges in secret during the 15-minute break between lunch and dinner service. I wrote essays at 1 in the morning while my parents slept upstairs and the restaurant refrigerators hummed below me like warning signs. When the acceptance packet from UCLA arrived, I almost didn't open it. I knew if it was a rejection, I'd have to carry that disappointment alone. But if it was good news, that would be even more dangerous. I stood in the stockroom with a box cutter in my hand and stared at that envelope like it was alive. Then I opened it. Full ride. Tuition covered. Housing support. Nursing program. Orientation dates. Welcome materials. My name in clean black letters above words I had dreamed about for so long they didn't look real. For about 5 seconds, I forgot where I was. I forgot the mop bucket in the corner, forgot the boxes of dried chiles stacked by the wall, forgot the sound of the fryers out front. I just looked at the letter and imagined a life that belonged to me. Then my father walked in. He took one look at my face and said, "What is that?" I should have lied. I know that now. I should have said school paperwork or tax forms or junk mail. Instead I smiled. I actually smiled. I handed him the letter like a fool still hoping love might be ego if the news was good enough. He read the first line. His jaw tightened. By the second paragraph, I could see the rage moving up his neck. He didn't yell right away. That would have been easier. Instead he folded the paper once, very neatly, like he was controlling himself, like maybe I still had a chance. Then he tore it in half. Not by accident. Not in a burst of motion. Slowly. He tore it once, then again. Small, deliberate rips. My mother came in halfway through. She saw the paper in his hands, looked at me, and I watched her decide in real time not to step between us. UCLA, my father said. You applied to UCLA. I remember the way he said the name. Not like a school. Like an insult. It was a full ride, I said, because some part of me still thought facts mattered. That made it worse. 3 generations of this family built this place, he said. And you're back here sneaking around applying to some school in California like we're something you need to escape. I'm not escaping, I said, though even as I said it, I knew that was a lie. I was trying to survive saying the truth. He laughed once. Hard and joyless. You think you're too good for us now. My mother finally spoke then, but not to defend me. You should have told us. I looked at her. Would you have let me? She didn't answer. That silence told me more than any fight could have. My father threw the torn pieces into the trash can next to the prep sink. You're not going anywhere, he said. When summer ends, you'll be full-time here. No more school nonsense. No more fantasy. Fantasy. That word stayed with me for years. Like wanting a life was childish. Like wanting more than endless shifts and inherited exhaustion was delusion. That night I lay awake in the tiny room above the restaurant and listened to my parents argue downstairs. My mother said she could have a better life. My father said, and what does that make ours? My mother said, that's not what I meant. My father said, if she walks out, she is dead to us. I can still hear the exact way the chair leg scraped when he stood up after saying it. Not angry anymore. Certain. That was the moment I understood something I had not let myself understand before. This was never really about tradition. It was about possession. I wasn't being asked to help the family. I was being told I belonged to it. The next morning, I called my chemistry teacher from the payphone behind the restaurant because it was the only place I could cry where nobody would hear me. Mrs. Wilson answered on the second ring. I said hello and then couldn't say anything else. She stayed on the line while I tried to breathe. Teachers do not get paid enough for the kind of mercy they give away for free. She didn't rush me. She didn't ask stupid questions. She just waited until I could get the words out. When I told her what happened, she said, very calmly, pack a bag. Come to school. We'll figure out the rest. I had $243 in cash, most of it saved from tips customers tucked into my hand when my father wasn't looking. I packed 3 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, my school binder, my toothbrush, my grandmother's rosary even though I wasn't religious, and the second copy of my acceptance letter Mrs. Wilson had made me print at school in case anything happened to the original. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It said, I hope one day you'll understand why I had to go. I hope one day I can make you proud. I meant every word of it. That was the sad part. I still wanted their approval even while I was running for my life. By the time the bus crossed the state line, my father had texted me exactly once. You are no longer our daughter. No hello. No goodbye. No question about whether I was safe. Just a sentence meant to remove me from myself. At 17, words like that still feel like they can rewrite your bones. UCLA was beautiful in the cruelest possible way. Beautiful because it showed me the size of the world. Cruel because I arrived there with 1 cheap suitcase, 2 dish towels my mother had accidentally packed with my clothes, and no idea how someone like me was supposed to belong in a place like that. My roommate arrived with 4 rolling cases and a mother who cried when they hugged goodbye. They had matching luggage tags. They talked about linen texture for the dorm sheets. They joked about how hard it was going to be living without the family's beach house on weekends. I smiled when I needed to smile. I nodded when I needed to nod. That first night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the communal shower and cried so quietly my throat hurt from holding the sound in. Homesickness is one thing. What I felt was stranger than that. I didn't miss home. I missed being wanted somewhere. By the second week, I had a cafeteria job that started before sunrise because early shifts paid slightly better and left room for classes. I learned how to function on fractured sleep. I learned which professors noticed when a student was drowning and which ones saw exhaustion as a character flaw. I learned how to stretch a meal card. I learned how to laugh when other students complained about not getting enough allowance. I never told anyone the whole truth. Not at first. How do you say, my father tore up my future with his bare hands and I came anyway? How do you say, my family would rather bury me than bless me? So I said my parents and I were not close. That was easier for other people to digest. By sophomore year I added a second job at the hospital. At first it was transport and basic support work. Then it became longer shifts, harder floors, worse hours. I was always tired, but in the hospital my tiredness felt cleaner. At least it was attached to something that mattered. I still remember the first time one of the nurses looked at me like I was useful. There was a patient in distress. The room had that electric panic hospitals get when too many things go wrong at once and everyone is moving fast but time still feels slow. Someone needed for access immediately. A nurse tried twice and missed. Another looked at the man's arm and said he was too difficult. Before I could think about it, I heard myself say, I can see one. Everybody turned. I probably should have stayed quiet. I was young. I was nobody. I was not supposed to insert myself into that moment. But I could see it. A faint line under fragile skin. Not obvious unless you were used to searching with your eyes instead of your hands. Years of chopping tomatoes, seeding jalapenos, sorting produce, studying ripeness by shade and tension in skin, had trained me to spot what other people missed. The nurse hesitated, then handed me the supplies. My hands were steady. First try. The line went in clean. The doctor looked at me after the patient stabilized and said, "Where did you learn that?" I almost said nowhere. Instead I said, "At my family's restaurant." He blinked. I said, "You learn to notice small differences fast when your whole day depends on it." He laughed a little, but not in a mocking way. In a surprised way. Like he had just realized talent didn't always come wrapped in the right pedigree. That moment changed everything for me. Not because it made me special overnight. But because it gave me proof that the years I thought had only trapped me had also trained me. I started studying vascular access techniques obsessively. I volunteered for the hard cases. I watched, listened, asked questions, stayed late. Difficult sticks became my thing. Then they became my reputation. Patients started asking for me by name. Nurses started pulling me into rooms when other attempts failed. Doctors noticed. I transferred that skill into every opportunity one could find. Certification. Training. Contract work. Teaching. Every door I opened led to another one, and for the first time in my life I stopped feeling like I was trespassing inside my own future. The first time I sent my parents money, I did it anonymously. I don't know why. Maybe because no matter how much pain they caused, some damaged part of me still believed children should help their parents. Maybe because success doesn't remove old wiring as quickly as people think. I mailed a holiday card the next year with my phone number in it. It came back unopened. Return to sender. That hurt more than the original rejection in a way I still have trouble explaining. At 17, cruelty feels dramatic. It burns hot. At 21, returned silence feels colder. It says, we are not angry anymore. We are committed. So I stopped reaching. I poured everything into work instead. By 24 I was making more money than anyone in my family had ever seen. By 27 I was consulting. By 29 I had built a mobile vascular access training company that hospitals hired because poor placement was costing them time, money, risk exposure, and patient trust. By 32, I had expanded into staffing, training systems, rural support contracts, and emergency procedure education. It no longer felt like I was just surviving. I was building. At 35, I owned the company outright, paid my employees well, carried almost no debt, and had more money in liquid reserves than my father's restaurant had made in its best 5 years combined. People love saying revenge success is the best success. It isn't. Success built from pain feels strange. Useful. Satisfying. Stabilizing. But strange. Because every milestone has two shadows attached to it. The first shadow says, look what you did. The second says, look what they made necessary. I bought my house in cash because I never wanted anyone to have the power to take shelter away from me again. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet. That mattered more. The first night I slept there, I woke up at 3 in the morning in a panic because it was too silent. No fryer hiss. No prep noise. No shouting downstairs. No clatter of deliveries at dawn. Just silence. My own silence. My own lock on the door. My own kitchen. I stood barefoot in the hallway and realized freedom does not always feel happy at first. Sometimes it feels unfamiliar enough to scare you. 18 years passed before anyone from my family called me. Not my parents. My cousin Elena's mother, Rosa. I was in the middle of a budget review when I saw her name flash across my screen. I almost didn't answer because I hadn't spoken to her since I was a teenager and I assumed it had to be a mistake. When I picked up, she was crying before she said hello. Maria, she said, and just hearing my name in a family voice again hit me harder than I expected. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but your father had a massive heart attack 3 days ago. Your mother says he's stable for now, but the hospital wants money they don't have. The restaurant is in trouble. They're behind on everything. And she stopped to breathe. They need help. Help. Not forgiveness. Not reunion. Help. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. All those years, and in the end the door back into my life opened with the same assumption that had always been waiting beneath everything else. Usefulness. What changed? I asked. Rosa was quiet for a second too long. Then she said, there's more. I think you need to come see it yourself. That sentence bothered me enough to get on a plane the next morning. I told my assistant to clear 3 days. I told my COO to handle the contract signing without me. I told nobody where I was going because I could not stand the thought of explaining that the people who had buried me were suddenly in crisis. Phoenix looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just finally grown into someone who could see it without fear. When I turned into the restaurant parking lot, I sat in my rental car for a full minute with both hands on the steering wheel. The sign still said Garcia's. But half the letters were dark. The paint on the building was peeling. One of the front windows had a crack running through the bottom corner. The landscaping was dead. The pride was gone. For a second, I felt something ugly and sharp inside me. Not joy. Not exactly. Just recognition. So this is what it costs, I thought, when the thing you worship finally stops protecting you. Inside, the restaurant smelled like old grease and bleach, like something being cleaned but never restored. My mother looked up from the counter and I almost did not recognize her. Age had collapsed into her face fast. Not the natural kind. The exhausted kind. The kind that shows up when stress has been eating somebody alive from the inside. She said my name like it hurt. Maria. No embrace. No rush forward. Just my name, spoken with the caution of someone approaching a wound she once caused and never really stopped causing. I followed her to the corner booth. My father was sitting there with an oxygen tank beside him and a stack of envelopes spread across the table. Medical bills. Collection notices. Legal warnings. Loan statements. For one surreal second, I thought about the first time he taught me long division on the back of a receipt at that same table. Then he looked up at me, and whatever tenderness that memory had almost created shut down immediately. He didn't look remorseful. He looked beaten. There's a difference. Remorse asks what it did to you. Defeat asks what you can do for me now. We made mistakes, he said, his voice rough and weaker than I remembered. Terrible mistakes. I said nothing. My mother pushed one of the hospital notices across the table. They want a payment by Friday to continue the current treatment plan without delay. We've already sold everything we could. How much? She said the number. It was large enough to matter to them and small enough that I could have covered it from the interest on one business account. That made me hate the situation more. Because the gap between our lives was now so wide that what had once seemed impossible to my family had become an admin decision to me. The bank is moving on the restaurant next month, my father said. If that happens, we lose everything. Everything. That word again. Everything always meant the business. Never me. I looked around the empty dining room. The cracked booths. The faded framed photos. The weak afternoon light coming through blinds that hadn't been replaced in years. This place already looks lost, I said. My mother flinched. My father held my gaze. We need family right now. That line almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because of the brutality of its timing. Family. After 18 years of pretending I was in the ground. I should have walked out then. A smarter woman might have. But pain does not always kill attachment. Sometimes it mutates it. And also, if I'm honest, I wanted answers. I wanted to understand what kind of people could erase a daughter and then sit across from her asking for mercy. So I said, I'll buy the restaurant. Both of them froze. Not save. Not bail out. Not help. Buy. My father's mouth opened slightly. My mother said, what? I'll buy the building, the equipment, the debt structure, and the operating rights. You can keep the name if I decide it's worth keeping. You'll become salaried employees with health insurance and fixed shifts. Professional oversight. No cash handling without approval. No borrowing against assets. No more operating like chaos is tradition. My father stared at me like I had slapped him. You would make us work for you? I looked him straight in the face. You made me start working for you before I was old enough to drive. His jaw clenched. There was a long silence. Then I said the part that mattered most. If I do this, there's a condition. My mother whispered, anything. Every year, we fund scholarships for local students who want to leave home for college. Full support where possible. No family pressure strings. No loyalty lectures. No guilt. A clean fund in our family name. The effect of that sentence on them was immediate and strange. Not relief. Not gratitude. Panic. Real panic. My father went pale. My mother said, too fast, no. I leaned back. No? Please don't do that, she said. That was when I knew Rosa had been right. There was more. Much more. Why, I asked slowly, would that be a problem? Neither of them answered. Instead, my mother looked toward the front door like she was waiting for a disaster to walk in. And then it did. The bell over the entrance chimed. A young woman stepped inside wearing a green Garcia's polo and black apron, carrying a backpack over one shoulder. She was about 18. Dark hair pulled back. Narrow face. Familiar eyes. She stopped when she saw me. I stood up without meaning to. Because for one impossible second, it felt like I had walked into a room with my younger self. Not identical, but close enough to make my skin go cold. She looked from me to my parents and then back again. Nobody spoke. Then she said, very quietly, "You're not dead." There are moments when the human body understands the truth before the mind catches up. Mine did. Everything in me went still. Not dead. Not missing. Not estranged. Not dead. My mother stood up so fast she knocked her knee into the table. "Elena, honey, we can explain." The girl didn't move. Her eyes stayed on me. "They told me my sister died in a highway accident when I was 3, she said. "There's an album upstairs with condolence cards." I don't remember deciding to sit back down. I just know my legs suddenly felt unreliable. I looked at my parents. My father was staring at the tabletop like if he held still enough, reality might pass over him. I said, "You told people I was dead." No one answered. The girl took one step farther inside. "Did they force you to stay here too?" I looked at her and something inside me cracked in a different direction than anger. Not toward my parents. Toward her. Because I knew that tone. It was the tone of somebody asking a question she already knew the answer to but still desperately wanted to be wrong about. "Yes," I said. "They tried." She nodded once, like a theory had just become evidence. Then she said, "I knew it." My mother started crying. I didn't look at her. "Who is she?" I asked, though I already understood enough to dread the answer. My father cleared his throat. "Her name is Elena." That wasn't what I asked. The girl answered for herself. "I'm the daughter they had after you left." She paused. Then added, with a calmness that was almost frightening, or at least that's what they told me. The room tilted. All the air felt wrong. I said, "Come outside." I wasn't talking to my parents. I was talking to her. My mother said my name in warning, and I turned so fast toward her that even now I'm surprised by how much cold anger I had left after all those years. "No," I said. "You do not get to stop this." Elena followed me out without argument. We stood beside my rental car in the late afternoon heat while traffic hissed by on the road beyond the lot. Up close, she looked even more exhausted than I'd realized. Not physically. Carefully. Like someone who had spent a long time hiding how much she knew. She said, "I found pictures of you 6 months ago." I waited. In the attic. Baby photos, school awards, birthday cards, an acceptance letter from UCLA that had been taped back together. After that, I started going through everything. The taped letter. Even after all those years, they had kept it. Not because it mattered to them. Because control likes trophies. "I need you to tell me the truth," she said. "Did you leave because they tried to stop you from going to school?" "Yes." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "I got into Stanford." Her voice broke on the last word, just enough to show how much pressure had been sitting on it. "They found my acceptance packet before I could tell them. Since then it's been non-stop. Crying. Guilt. Family speeches. My dad having chest pain every time college comes up. My mom saying good daughters don't leave. They keep talking about sacrifice. Loyalty. Blood." Every word she said landed with the sickening weight of repetition. Same playbook. Different daughter. "How long have you known they were lying about me?" I asked. 6 months that something was wrong, she said. 3 months that the death story was fake. 2 weeks that if you were real, you'd come back eventually. I stared at her. You expected me? She gave a small, humorless smile. I didn't know when. I just knew if you were alive, this story wasn't over. There are people you love because you have history with them. And then there are people you recognize instantly because pain built matching rooms inside both of you. I said, do you want to leave with me? She answered so fast it felt like she had already left in her mind a long time ago. Yes. Do you need to pack? She shook her head and lifted the backpack strap slightly. Most of my important stuff is already in my trunk. That line told me everything I needed to know about how long she had been preparing to escape. When we walked back inside, my mother rushed toward us. Elena, please, don't do this. Elena stepped behind me with quiet instinct, not fear exactly, but the body memory of someone who already knew who in that room was safe. My father stood slowly, leaning on the table. You're not taking her anywhere. I almost asked if that was a threat. Then I realized I had no interest in pretending his authority still existed. She's 18? I asked Elena. She nodded. I looked back at him. Then I'm not taking anyone. She's leaving. He turned to her. If you walk out now, don't come back. The line hit me like an echo from another lifetime. And that was the moment I knew he had learned nothing. Not one thing. Elena looked at him for a long second. Then she said, you already used that line on one daughter. Maybe get new material. And we left. She followed me to my house 2 hours later after collecting her car from the lot where she had hidden it half a block from the restaurant. She walked through my front door like somebody crossing a border she wasn't sure she was allowed to survive. I told her where the guest room was. She stood there with both hands on her bag and looked around like the quiet itself might be temporary. This is yours if you want it for as long as you need, I said. She looked at me and asked the saddest question I had heard in years. What do you need me to do? Not thank you. Not are you sure? What do you need me to do? Transactional survival packed into one sentence. Nothing, I said. You don't owe me labor to stay here. Something changed in her face then. Not relief all at once. Something slower. Like her nervous system had heard a language it did not speak yet, but wanted to learn. That night she came into the kitchen carrying a laptop, a legal pad, and a file box. I need to show you something, she said. What followed was one of the most disturbing hours of my life. She had been documenting them. Not casually. Meticulously. Audio files labeled by date. Screenshots of texts. Videos recorded with her phone half hidden in her apron pocket. Copies of emails. Notes from conversations. Written entries about what happened, how long it lasted, what they threatened, what they implied. She had built a case. I listened to my father call education selfishness in 12 different tones. I watched my mother weaponize tears with surgical precision. I heard them use me like a ghost story. Your sister thought she was too good for us. Look where that got her. Don't end up like her. A dead girl used as discipline. A missing life turned into a cautionary tale. I felt sick. How long have you been recording? I asked. Almost a year, she said. At first I thought I was overreacting. Then I realized every conversation left me feeling guilty for wanting normal things. My school counselor said if someone keeps making you doubt your reality, you document reality. Smart girl. Braver than I had been at her age. What did you plan to do with all this? I asked. She looked at me over the screen. Survive long enough to need it. There was a steadiness in her that made me ache for all the versions of her that must have had to grow up too quickly in order to build it. I asked if she had eaten. She said not really. So I made eggs and beans and warmed tortillas on the stove, and we ate at my kitchen island past midnight while she told me pieces of her life in no particular order. How her parents monitored every college conversation. How they framed obedience as gratitude. How they praised smallness. How they panicked any time a teacher said she was exceptional. How she used to think they were overprotective and old-fashioned, and only later realized those were just prettier words for control. At one point she said, "I used to think love was supposed to feel like a debt you could never finish paying." I put my fork down. Because that sentence does not come out of somebody unless they have been living inside emotional captivity for a very long time. The next morning, my parents arrived at my house before 7. I knew it was them from the pounding alone. Not knocking. Pounding. The kind that says the people on the other side still think access is a right. When I opened the door, my father was flushed and breathing hard. My mother had mascara smudged under both eyes like she had been crying for hours and wanted the evidence to show. "Elena needs to come home," my father said immediately. Behind me, Elena called from the dining room, "No, I don't." He tried to look past me into the house. "You're confusing her." "She seems very clear to me," I said. My mother put her hand to her chest. "Please don't do this. She's upset. You know how persuasive you can be, Maria." That almost impressed me. Within 12 hours they had already tried to rewrite her decision as my influence. Elena came to the doorway holding her phone. "Say that again," she said. Both of them froze. "Go ahead," she said. "Tell my sister she manipulated me into leaving." My father noticed the phone in her hand and his expression shifted. "What are you doing?" "Creating an accurate record," she said. That line was so calm it almost made me smile. He changed tactics. "You're still a child," he snapped. "You don't understand what family means." Elena pressed play. My father's own voice filled the front hall. "If your sister had stayed where she belonged, we wouldn't be in this mess. Don't copy selfish people. Good daughters don't leave." The recording ended. No one spoke. Then Elena said, "I have dozens more." My mother whispered, "Why would you do this to us?" And there it was. Even now. Even here. Not "Why did we make you feel unsafe enough to record us?" Why would you do this to us? That inversion is the secret language of abusive families. They turn exposure into the offense. Elena lifted her chin slightly. "Because every time I tried to talk honestly, you turned it into guilt. Recording was the only way to prove I wasn't imagining it." My father looked at me. "This is your fault." "No," I said. "This is the result of 18 years of choices." They left when I told them if they did not get off my property, I would call the police. My father muttered something about lawyers on the way to the car. I told him to please do. I was better at lawyers than he was. That part, at least, was true. 3 days later I sat in a conference room with my attorney, my parents, and Elena while purchase documents for the restaurant were laid out on the table. I had expected tension. I had not expected revelation. The acquisition itself was straightforward. Asset control. Debt assumption. Employment contracts. Medical coverage for both of them. Operational oversight. Non-interference clauses. Restricted financial authority. My attorney, David, had built an excellent structure. He knew enough from my short summary to understand this wasn't just business. It was containment. My father was halfway through skimming the employment terms when Elena said, "There's one thing we haven't talked about." Everyone looked at her. She set a manila folder on the table. I found my adoption file. The room changed temperature. My mother went still in a way that told the truth before anyone spoke it. I turned slowly toward Elena. "What?" She looked at me first, not them. "I'm adopted." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. Then I looked at my parents and saw no surprise on their faces. Only dread. Elena opened the folder and slid a copy toward me. Agency name. Placement records. Legal clearances. Age at placement, 6 months. Placement date, 8 months after I left home. Everything in my body recoiled. 8 months. Not years later. Not after healing. Not after reflection. 8 months after discarding me, they had gone searching for another daughter. Elena's voice was very calm now, which made it worse. There's more. The agency notes mention that the adoptive parents requested a child who physically resembled family photographs they provided. I looked down at the page again. And there it was. In black and white. Resemblance preference. Similar complexion. Dark hair. Compatible appearance with family line. My father said, that language is standard. No one at the table believed him. Elena turned another page. The case notes say they brought photos of Maria as a baby to assist with matching. David, my attorney, removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose like he suddenly wished very deeply to be representing anybody else in the city. I could not stop staring at the paperwork. People say there are moments when a person's past reorganizes itself all at once. That happened to me in that room. Because I realized they had not simply disowned me. They had treated me as a failed prototype. And then gone looking for a corrected version. My mother started crying. That is not what happened. Elena laughed once. It was not a happy sound. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, that is exactly what happened. She reached back into the folder and pulled out a small notebook with a floral cover so worn at the edges it had clearly been handled often. This was with the paperwork, she said. Mom's handwriting. Some of Dad's. Diary entries. Progress notes. Training notes, practically. She opened it and read. Isabel, she stopped herself. No. That was the nickname they used for me when I was a baby. Listen to this. She cries less than Maria did. Easier temperament. More trusting. If guided early, she may not develop the same defiant streak. My mother covered her mouth. Elena turned the page. Here's another one. Teacher says she's advanced verbally. Need to be careful praising that too much. Too much independence led Maria to believe she could leave us. My skin went cold. Another page. Mentioned college after seeing a television commercial. Shut that down immediately. Better to root her identity in family before outside ambitions take hold. David closed the file in front of him very gently, like sudden movements might make the whole room explode. I looked at my father. Did you keep notes on how to make her more obedient than me? He didn't answer. Which was answer enough. Elena said, there's one more line you should hear. She turned near the end and read without any emotion at all, which somehow made it the most emotional thing in the room. This is our chance to do it right. Maria was born ours and still rejected us. Maybe a child shaped from the beginning will understand what family costs and not betray us the same way. Nobody moved. I understood then that I had spent years imagining the scale of their damage incorrectly. I thought they had destroyed one daughter. But what they had really built was a system. A system with a script. A role. An approved ending. And they had plugged a second girl into it. My father finally spoke. We were devastated when you left. The sheer selfishness of that sentence nearly took my breath away. Not we were wrong. Not we hurt you. We were devastated. I stood. So you bought another daughter? Maria. No. My voice came out sharper than I expected. Do not use that tone like this as an emotional misunderstanding. You lied to the entire family. You told people I was dead. You raised her inside a story built from my disappearance. And now you want to say you were devastated? My father's face hardened, because shame in men like him often metabolizes into anger when it has nowhere else to go. We gave both of you everything. Elena stared at him. No, she said. You gave us conditions. That line hung in the room like a verdict. She turned to David. Can they be legally restricted from contacting me unless I initiate it? David nodded slowly. Yes. Under the employment and conduct terms tied to the sale, with additional protective language. Good, she said. Add it. My mother started crying harder. Please don't do this. We love you. Elena looked at her with such deep sadness that for a second even my anger stepped back to make room for it. You loved the version of me that stayed small, she said. You never loved the version of me that became real. They signed. Both of them. My father's signature shook. My mother's tears stained the bottom corner of the page. I signed last. Not because I was hesitating. Because I wanted them to watch me do it. The daughter they buried. The daughter they tried to replace. The daughter whose future they tore up with their hands. Owning the thing they chose over her. That night Elena sat on the guest bed in my house with the floral notebook open across her knees. I knocked lightly on the doorframe and asked if I could come in. She nodded. I keep reading the same pages, she said without looking up. Like if I read them enough times maybe they'll become less insane. I sat in the chair by the window. Do you want company or silence? She thought about it. Company. So I stayed. After a while she said, do you know what's messing with me the most? I waited. It's not even the adoption. I mean, that hurts. Obviously. She swallowed. It's that I was loved for performing. Every time I was quiet, they praised me. Every time I doubted myself, they called it respect. Every time I gave up a piece of myself, they acted like I was becoming a good daughter. I thought that was what love looked like. I said, a lot of people spend their whole lives confusing approval with love. She looked down at the notebook. One of these entries is from when I was 5. My teacher recommended an enrichment program. Mom wrote that they declined because they didn't want me getting ideas above my station. I closed my eyes briefly. Above my station. There it was again. The same hierarchy. The same terror of movement. The same need to make ambition look like betrayal. They were afraid, I said. She gave me a bitter half-smile. That's the part everyone loves saying about people like them. That they were afraid. Like fear makes this smaller. No, I said. It doesn't make it smaller. It just explains why they needed control so badly. She nodded once. Then, very quietly, do you hate them? I could have answered quickly. I didn't. Because hate is not as simple as people think when it attaches to the people who raised you. I hate what they chose, I said. I hate what they did. I hate how long they made me feel disposable. I hate what they built around your life. But some part of me spent so many years wanting them to change that hatred never got to stay pure. It kept getting contaminated by grief. That made her eyes fill instantly. Not because I had said something poetic. Because she understood it. People who have not lived through family betrayal think the opposite of love is hate. It isn't. The opposite of love is indifference. Hate is still a form of attachment. And detaching from the people who taught you your first definition of home can feel like peeling your own skin off. A week later, Elena told me she wanted one final confrontation. Not because she expected healing. Not because she wanted apology. Because she wanted the truth said out loud, in a room where it could not hide behind tears or tradition. So we met them at the restaurant before opening, when the dining room was empty and the chairs were still upside down on half the tables. The four of us sat in the same corner booth like some diseased version of a family reunion. Elena put her phone on the table, screen down, recording. My father noticed it and said, "Really?" She said, "You taught me to prepare." I almost smiled. Then she asked the question that mattered more than any other. Why did you really disown Maria? Not the public reason. Not the restaurant reason. Not the loyalty speech. The real reason. My mother started crying before the question had even fully settled between us, which told me she knew exactly what was being asked. My father stared at the napkin dispenser. No one answered. Elena said, "If you lie, I leave. If you dodge, I leave. If you start talking about sacrifice without talking about control, I leave." He looked up then. And for the first time in the entire saga, I saw something close to honesty enter his face. Not kindness. Not insight. Just stripped down ugliness. Because she rejected us, he said. The sentence hit the table like a dropped glass. He kept going. We gave our whole lives to that place. Everything. Time. Health. Youth. Marriage. We did not have hobbies. We did not have vacations. We did not have backups. That restaurant was the proof that all of it meant something. And then she got one letter from one school and looked at us like this life wasn't enough. I stared at him. He said it like the wound was fresh. Like 18 years had not passed. Like my wanting freedom had happened to him yesterday. You thought I was saying you weren't enough, I said. You were, he snapped. Every time you talked about leaving, that's what you meant. You wanted something better. Which meant you thought we were something worse. There it was. The core. Not tradition. Not community. Humiliation. My mother whispered, "You made us feel small." I laughed then, once, because the cruelty of that sentence was almost too perfect. I was 17. Neither of them spoke. Elena looked from them to me and back again. So when she chose herself, you punished her. And when you couldn't get her back, you went shopping for a girl you